coming.
Thank you for having us.
We're gonna get as much out of this group today as we can. This is the Wednesday, May 28th, 2025 meeting of the Municipal Building Blue Ribbon Committee. And we have minutes to approve. Has everyone had a chance to
You
read
want
the
to do
minutes?
attendance first?
Sure.
I know it's not on the agenda, but
Okay. Chief Newport, John O'Leary, Cameron Horak, here. Peter Weeks, Mary Lou McElwain,
Here.
Gentlemen, Renee, good to have you with us.
Thank you.
We do not have Kate Coyle today.
city managers.
The city manager is giving a speech, I believe. Councilor Cook. present. First item is our minutes. Peter.
Chairman, I have, as usual, the minutes were very well done. But under
Say thank you,
Roman
Jack.
numeral 3, letter B, last line, I think it should say Mill Pond, not
Yes.
Bill Pond.
Yes.
Yes.
Who's Bill and why does he have a pond? Okay. Any other changes?
The only change is that I regretfully say that at the meeting, it does indicate that the facilities director is in attendance and he was traveling out of state at the time, so. So I don't want him blamed for anything.
No falls on my shoulders.
He has an alibi.
He has an alibi.
Plausible excuse.
Is there a motion to approve as amended?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Chairman, the only comment I would have, I think there's a misinterpretation, at least between Chief Newport and myself, because I asked a question on the matrix report of whether or not, when they did the study, they figured how many policemen were on the rolls at the time. And my indication was they based it on the number of calls that had been made and the number of police are making those calls. I understand from listening to a council work session the other night that the chief may not have agreed with that, and so it's still, in my mind, it's still an outstanding issue of how many people were figured in the report. If we only had 63 or 64, how could they do an assessment with 70 people that weren't there? Outstanding issue in my mind.
Chief, did you wish to address that?
Yeah, the way, I played the question back from our meeting, and the question was asked, at least my interpretation of the question was asked is your staff, your analysis based off of the current staff that we have, or is that going off the full complement of authorized positions? And Mr. Brady's response was, that's the authorized positions, including the unfilled positions.
Thanks for the clarification.
So I think there still needs to be clarification on that though, because I believe, based on the report that I saw, there was an authorized number and then there was a recommended number. And the recommended number is one more than the authorized number. But when I was talking to, so 71 versus 70.
Yeah.
But when I was talking, and you were not available, it was one of those fast scheduled meetings. But what I understood was that they used the number that we had to generate the performance, but they're recommending because of, it's not a sustainable, your current staffing is not sustainable, that, the overtime is excessive and the the impacts to quality of life and mental health are significant, so therefore the additional staffing is warranted. And that was the reason for their recommended number. So that was my understanding, but
I would agree with that 100%.
yeah, so the challenge right now though is we need to get you all the final document. You guys had a meeting, I wasn't able to be at the meeting today, but it sounds like Monday we'll be able to get final draft, which means probably Wednesday, probably middle of the week, next week, we should have a document to share.
So for our next meeting of this.
We meet next Wednesday.
Yeah, so hopefully by next Wednesday, we'll have a final draft
Hopefully.
to you all. But we all need to, I mean, the chief found some challenges in the last draft, I found a couple things in the last draft. So we're, it's like a typical report, when we're pushing them hard to get it done.
Had they ever done any work for the city before?
Yeah, they did a prior one for the police department back
Yeah.
in 2014.
And this isn't atypical for studies like this, Peter, because there's a lot of information and they're coming from the outside and they, when they're digesting all that stuff, it's easy to either misinterpret or miss a piece. And that's why, we're involved in reviewing it.
I had the question just from a data perspective, though. The study is based upon current staffing, current performance. Because if they're measuring
The existing
it-
performance is, my understanding, the initial performance, or the existing performance evaluation was based on existing staffing levels. However, their recommendation isn't to say, well, because you're able to keep up with it right now, that's not a sustainable number, and it's in your best interest for staff retention, for reducing overtime, and for a number of reasons, to get that number up to where it was projected, plus and one additional. But we need to get this report to you so you can see it, and see their justifications.
So I think in just the simplest forms, I've been thinking about this is an explanation that is easily to understand is like a basketball team, you need 5 players. Most teams have 10 players. Why is that? Because 5 players could be great, but they can only play for so long or someone could get hurt, so you need backup. And this is the same thing is, we may be functioning fine at 66, but to be a successful team, we need to be at 70.
Yeah, my questioning was really along the lines of what the data it said. So that's why I was questioning. I was like, you can't extrapolate what performance would be from numbers you don't have.
Right, and I don't think that was,
Yeah.
I think this, and we'll get the clarification on that 100%, because I think there was a misinterpretation of what was being asked.
All right.
Yeah, Cameron?
So, I don't know if this has been, and I haven't tracked the site since I asked for it, but if the overtime assessment from city accounting and finance has been uploaded, I think that's kind of the appropriate complement to this conversation to understand, okay, so if all these folks that are currently working overtime are no longer working overtime, then those hours are now full-time regular hours, and the budget should reflect that. In theory.
In theory.
Yeah, I'm sorry, can I say something?
Sure, Renee.
Explain that again, what you're
So
saying.
if we have 66 on our force right now,
Right.
part of the challenge is they're working an excessive amount of overtime hours.
Yeah.
The cost of those overtime hours is not identical to the cost of regular FTE hours. And so if we fill those roles and we have a fully staffed force, then in theory, the payroll should be lower than it is with the overtime hours. And so understanding that would require both the assessment of what the need is and what the current spend is with what is reflected right now as an excessive overtime spend.
That's common sense.
If I can just clarify, you also have to take into consideration benefits on that, so it's not just a
Correct.
one-on-one.
Yeah, no.
It's just not so much
What is
per
the
hour
comp
versus so much
for-
per
yeah.
hour. There is also.
What's the comp for a full-time role versus what's the
Yeah.
comp in overtime?
Yes.
Right, but I think, well, there's 2 levels to this conversation. One is we're trying to determine the space needs of a future department, right? And
Which has some imputed level of staffing.
right. Then there's a separate conversation going on with the city council and the budget.
Correct.
We're not having that discussion.
Right, and it's, and unfortunately, these things aren't like one for one, easy to determine, because the overtime hours don't always decrease by the number of increased staffing. Sometimes the need changes as you have more people, there are more opportunities sometimes to fill overtime. So it doesn't always kind of go one for one, unfortunately. At least that's the city's experience, so it's challenging.
And it's 3 shifts, 7 days a week. So if there are, some shifts are thinner than others.
Yeah.
And so you have 2 people out on a small shift, you're gonna have mandatory overtime. And as Councilor Cook says, it's not always a directly proportional relationship.
Right. But that staffing implies how many people are working at what times and what the space needs are, so it all kind of flows through to the same outcome.
Any more discussion on that? It's a good point. It bears on our final conclusions. So Counselor Cook and I were wondering how to use our time this meeting. We don't have the matrix study back. We don't have an architect yet. But going through the minutes, we got a pretty good sense now, everybody who's been to 2 police stations, had discussion. We pulled out all of the items that various people felt strongly about. And we thought that we would go through a priority exercise, kind of a forced ranking of what the committee feels is important. And it's gonna be very democratic. We're not gonna get we're gonna let you each put down, we're gonna give you 7 votes. I was initially.
7 now?
Yeah, we talked about 5, but I looked at this.
11 items, you might as well.
10, 11 items. I thought that was a little stingy. We're gonna give you 7 votes. You can put all 7 on one if you want. You can spread them out one apiece, where you'd like to do that. And we'll see what this shows about a sense of the committee and its priorities. We did our best to identify things that people have spoken about as the wants and the needs they feel should be in the new municipal building. So, one other question, normally I've done these in other settings and I do the old-fashioned sticky dots. We thought we'd automate it, but this would mean each of you would have to call out your votes, or we could use a ballot if you prefer, so that we don't.
I would think a ballot would probably be easiest.
Easiest for Jackie. All right, that's what we'll do then. Renee, I think I gave you one.
I have one. So,
Okay.
I'll pass these out. We had one for the city.
No, I'm not voting.
Yeah, but see, I didn't hear.
You wanna vote for Karen?
She did not delegate, she did not direct me to be her representative, so I'm not going to do that. I'm Switzerland.
So
Yes, you are.
it depends on what you feel
Thank you.
is most critical.
Okay.
can I go with things
We're
that
not
do not
ranking
feel
them,
it's
we're just
critical at
checking
all? Zero or?
7 votes,
Just don't,
right?
just leave them blank and then it'll,
All
yeah.
7 in
It'll
one
tell the
spot,
You won't
story.
get votes, yeah.
You said yes.
If you want.
If you wanted to, you could put them all in one spot.
And
I appreciate the list. I have to say, when you characterize things with adjectives like inadequate, it's hard to not give it attention.
True.
And I don't think there's much question that, for example, the lab space is inadequate. But one question I have is, do we need our own lab? Is there a way to have a lab that's shared with another department or a private facility? That's just a question that hasn't come up in our conversations. What we have is in fact inadequate from what I can see, what little I know. But does that mean we need our own better new lab, or, it's a conversation we haven't had.
if that comes out as a priority of this group, then we can explore what the options are, I would say.
Quick answer.
Yeah.
The problem with like trying to share a lab is you have custody of chain of custody issues as far as when you're dealing with evidence and stuff like that, processes of evidence, and it just wouldn't be efficient to be bringing.
That's the sort of answer that, we just haven't talked about it, and I figured you'd have an answer for
I
it.
could speak to it just from a legal sense, the chain of custody and then who you'd have to subpoena to court, it's not done anywhere because the implications from a court perspective as well as, making sure, maintaining that
So
evidence.
there's no state lab that's used on some criminal matters?
The state lab does do testing, but there's this very specific process for chain of custody and
So, yeah, just to add on that, there's a state lab, and sometimes some of the stuff we do in our own lab is to prepare evidence to go to the state lab. So The state lab is the authorizing authority of saying, that's someone's DNA or something to that matter.
To simplify it, you need a lab.
And
I guess in the sense of what you're saying a lab is, it's more of an
evidence
evidence.
storage.
You don't necessarily need a state
Processing.
level lab, you need a lab.
Yeah, it's like a processing room,
And where an officer comes in has to, like, say they collect evidence in a case, like, make sure to put it into a locker or to store it so that, and that we can track the chain very carefully in terms
So it's
of.
not contaminated in any way.
Correct, and so, yeah,
Having been a police reporter once and sent to the biggest murder trial in the state, and they were holding space on page 1, and the whole day was chain of custody.
yeah.
They said,
Well, if you
what's your story? I
if you-
said,
if you
I don't
watch-
have a story.
If you watch any of the Karen Reed trial, there's all kinds of issues of chain of custody and proper
Well, I mean, you lose
processing
cases
of
this way.
evidence.
My suggestion, going back to what John said, I would hate, I think your idea of going through and picking the 7 top items, but I don't think it would be good thinking for somebody to use all 7 votes for one item. I think that would screw the.
It would skew it, the results.
It's up to each of you to determine.
And
Right.
if I can, oh, never mind.
No, and I
Yes,
wanted to address Mr. Tallman's question to some degree, because I grew up in a state where not every police force has evidence storage in a lab, but that's because they're communities that are really small. So things go instead to the county and to the sheriff's department. And they're collected, they go immediately there, because those tiny forces don't have that capability. Choosing to not have a lab would mean that we were going back to being a very, like a small rural police force, which, that's just not how we operate, so, yeah.
And also in other community, like other parts of the state, the sheriff is a very big presence, and here it's like the local police departments are what are, prominent, whereas the sheriff's function is much more limited.
Don't forget to put your names on your ballots.
Oh,
so
no.
Jackie can-
Professor Tabor. Are you emeritus at this point, John?
I wanna know how you reported the police issues for the Portsmouth Herald, is that what you did? You were a reporter?
Color sidebar.
Oh. How interesting. I missed the police reports in the Portsmouth Herald.
It's Old Ferry Landing drink. Go get a Jimmy Juice and you can talk it over.
Yeah, Jimmy Juice got good publicity this week.
Peter Rice, did you go to the ferry landing this week?
I did not.
There's still time.
There's still time.
Didn't wanna get thrown off the dock.
I can swim.
What are you doing at 4:15, Peter?
Not going down there to get a drink.
I helped Dick
It's
stain the
Wednesday.
deck before the deck was in place.
Oh, my gosh.
We were at the house because it got put on overnight.
I like to go to places where I'm less visible. My house.
Are we passing him down or?
Sure. We'll just walk over and give them to Jackie.
Take them into a paper airplane.
Don't peek.
I'll walk over.
There you go.
My legs work.
Joe's getting me a pen.
That was fun, I could have given you a pen.
Okay.
I think Jackie should count the votes.
It's gonna be complex the way it is. Again.
You can't use whiteout.
Live.
That might take us some time.
So if somebody voted 8 times, it's disqualified, right?
Yeah.
Should
Well,
be.
we throw the 8th vote out.
Which one is the 8th?
It was a hanging chat.
Nobody's name is.
That's Tabor, Mr. Peters.
Tabor, so it's,
Oh,
he put 2 in his, the first one, 1 in the second one. Skip 1 down to HVAC, 1, skip 2 down to re-eval space, 1, and the next one below 2. Alright, Kate Coyle, first one 5, imbalance vote. Next one's
Before we,
5.
Yep.
Next one 1. 3 spaces, 1, that should be in the stay within 42.
this one?
Third space,
3,
right.
1 more down.
1.
Can you slide over to see if,
I know, I have to.
make sure we're. Okay, yep. Alright,
If you highlight the cell below Peter and left of meet space and workflow needs and freeze that pane, you will see column A throughout. So if you go to
so you have to go up to
B5,
B or
B5,
Okay.
go to view. And click freeze pane. There you first one,
rows.
and that will make your job a whole lot easier.
Oh, thank you.
gonna say talking spreadsheets.
I know. There we go. That's why you're on this committee.
Right.
At the end.
And
Okay.
she's got 1,
Up to the young guy.
2, 1,
I happen to spend about 60 hours a week in Microsoft Excel.
121.
I'm sorry.
space, 1, space, 1,
at least
space 1.
it totals for her.
Yes.
Right.
That's helpful.
Awesome. Kate Cook, 2 spaces down, third space, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, down to 2 spaces below. That's it. Mr. Chalman, start at the top, 1, next one down, 1, next one down, 1, next one down, 1, next one down, 1, had to go space, 1, space, 1. Should be 2 spaces below, yep. Peter Weeks, 2 spaces, go to the third one,
Okay.
third one, 1, next one's 1, next one's 1, space, 1, 1, space,
Suspense.
1, 1.
I think they were gonna use our names.
Alright. Mary Lou,
We're getting
starting at the
graded
top,
next.
1, 1, 1, 1, 6 ones, and then 2 spaces, and another 1. Alright. Cameron,
Good. 2, 7.
no, Cameron, that's
Oh,
Karen.
Cameron, I'm sorry. 7.
He's just.
Over there. Yep, here. 1, 2 spaces, 2, 1. Next one, 2, 1, 1, 1. Should be 3 spaces below, yep. John O'Leary, I assume. It says John.
Oh, John.
Our only John.
Only John. 5, 2 spaces, 1, 2 spaces, 1. Mark Newport, 7.
I was like, yeah, that would really surprise me
We have our totals there.
All right.
So usually you throw an outlier out.
So we should.
Still wouldn't
Thank
matter.
you.
3 of those.
Sort these? Do you know how to?
Oh,
Based on
Cameron may know
ranking?
that
Sort in what way?
by totals. By
You
vote.
would, yeah, you
totals.
Yeah, you just select.
got it some,
Right
but
side,
you could
John.
select that column
and then organize.
And then you could
And then, yeah.
sort by value.
That, sort by.
It's 5 people.
Kara said it's,
It's gonna prompt you to expand the selection, so just select column M,
Wait, how did
It just added, just,
it added
Added
7.
So is a,
the 7 wasn't in there.
Can we save it before we do that?
sure, it's on desktop. You wanna go for a second?
Select column M, go to data,
Go over to, get rid of this right here. This
Whatever it was.
I know,
Just open the calculator.
or Jack. I could just read it.
This is like,
Let me give the select with the, just M.
yeah, I would select column M and go to data.
Yep, sort.
it's like election night when Kelly comes out and all the names are in alphabetical order, so you don't know who's on top.
This, wanna go to M and do sort.
Yes.
We wanna pick up all the other columns as well.
Yeah, so it's gonna prompt you to expand them and then it'll reorder for you. So select the whole column.
Just, don't you, just select all from the very top?
Yeah, you know, it'd have to be after July 1st.
Yep, you should just, so say yes next time.
Smallest, largest, also small, largest.
Small.
And just say yes, sort, there you go. There you go. So it automatically reordered
right.
the rows, there you go.
It should have.
The table formatting is gonna be wonky because it changed the highlighting of the rows, but you can fix that later.
All right, so here's, but equally important, fix the HVAC, improve health and safety, reevaluate space defined needs, strong showing for get out of the lower level, as well as remedying the lab and evidence space. The common entrance area. I'm surprised we don't have as many budget hops.
This isn't the council?
You know, it just shows what happens when you can vote 7 times for the same thing.
I mean, but you could
So-
take that out.
You can take
Take that out, it's still number 1.
There were 3 who gave that very high votes, and it makes sense that it should be high. I mean, that was one of the roles of this committee,
That's right.
so.
But
Some of those overlap as well, I mean,
Yeah,
you know,
Yes.
I mean, it's not precise.
getting
Obviously,
space
we're-
needs figured out,
I mean,
and whether or not that combines the public people together or not, those aren't mutually exclusive, those
That's
are,
correct.
they overlap.
That's the way I looked at it.
I voted for improved health and space across the complex because I want that for everyone.
And the thing is that the HVAC, health and safety across the building, one versus the other, they're pretty much the same thing.
Chief, you had,
I just say, I think they all fall into really the first, I mean, I know it says PPD, but if that said complex space, I still would have voted for. All the other, everything else is gonna fall in line underneath what our achievable goal is.
You know, the other interesting thing was, one of our charges was to bring the public entrance for certain departments to the front of the building. I mean, that's one of our charges.
Right, that's why I said basically if that said meet space and workflow needs of the city
Municipal
complex,
complex,
municipal
yeah.
complex.
If we consolidated rows 5, 7, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, like if we start to go down the list here of things that are really optimizing the space and addressing the needs of the people who show up for work here every day of the week, those things, to Rick's point, are not mutually exclusive.
That's correct.
And if we solve those problems, it's more likely than not that those problems get solved by sorting each other out in some way, shape, or form. Because addressing one issue is likely to help us address the next issue. There's a certain interrelation here of these.
Correct. So like, you know, the thing of getting us out of the basement space, the basement space and the first floor, there's not much of a difference. Matter of fact, there's been more mold in the first floor than there was in the basement. So,
And I think that, you know, when you start talking about reevaluating space needs, I think in my mind, that encompasses the single point of entrance for the, so I think that, you know, they're not mutually exclusive.
Right.
They're just the same thing stated
Right.
somewhat differently.
Having us be able to walk in the front door of the police department and have the same points of service that they have, much like Dover has.
Right.
And having people walk in the front door of the complex here and be able to access the tax collector and the registrar and be able to do their business in an orderly and efficient way. And, you know, for Mark and for others that work in the city, you know, Peter and Joe, folks that come in here with disabilities, there is a lift here. And, you know, I'm sure there's a certain extent to which you all do your very best to help people with disabilities get in and serve them. But not having single points of service really severely impacts those people more than anyone
Well,
else.
it's like Kate talked about when, at the last time we were here, that there was a woman there with a young child who,
Right.
if you're not comfortable using that lift,
Heavy machinery.
you know, it's.
What
and-
might be perceived as.
Yes, no, that was an excellent example.
Right, somebody has to go for that person, you know, and I went to the clerk's office, the clerk ran down to help, and, you know, you wouldn't have those challenges if you had space
Better
near the front
workflows.
of the building.
Understood.
So
Okay.
is this information, this is for us to discuss, but it's going to come, will be brought to the next level, the design firm,
Not
or
necessarily, but
our
I think,
priorities?
you know, we had a lot of advocates for a lot of different points of view.
Right.
Have we hired the design firm yet? Is it getting close?
Yes.
well, I think
You've been well taught.
Is 4 o'clock this afternoon soon enough?
You've been well,
It depends on what the definition of
That
is,
witness is well
ladies and
taught.
gentlemen.
We're working on, we don't want to announce somebody until we've verified the scope of service and budget. Because if we cannot come to a agreeable scope and service and budget, we'll need to go to the next qualified bid or proposer. So it's a matter of, you know, we don't tip our cards until we've all worked out the
Understood.
details,
Yeah.
and then we announce.
thank you.
So you don't have an architect yet?
Wait a second.
Yes, we do not have an architect yet.
Yes, we do not have an
Yes, we do not.
I was just gonna think,
No, we do,
say,
no, we do not.
what this whole thing comes down to is just what is gonna be the feasibility of doing whatever we do in this complex, or is it better to benefit looking at something else? You know, is it to retrofit this to do what we all would love it to do, is gonna come at a cost. Well, we don't know what that cost is gonna be. So until we get there and get a feasibility of what can be done here and what that cost will be, I think that's what's really, at the end of the day, is gonna drive the decision.
But we've got a majority of this committee feeling it's important to find the inefficient space uses in the existing building. Yeah. And I think
True, that's true, but to have the center point of entry and all the other things, there's a lot of things that would have to be done with this building outside of just that, that's gonna cost a lot of money.
Say something. Have you identified a piece of property?
We went through that whole lot.
Here.
I was not here.
Right here.
It's here,
Okay, all right, I just wanted to.
Where was it?
yes.
We're here.
very good.
The reason I asked about this questionnaire is, are we going to bring this information when we meet with whoever gets hired? Because we talked about that, talking specifically with a design group, an architect, about what this committee has been discussing and what our conclusions are. And it seems to me that this questionnaire and the results of this would be kind of a stepping stone with an architect or a design group.
Well, it'll be in the minutes.
Yes, it'll be it's more of it's an exercise for us to think about what the committee's priorities are, because this isn't really scientific or data driven
No.
because of the way we did the voting.
Right.
But it's helpful for this committee in framing conversation about next steps. And I have a question for the committee, because we looked at these things, we ranked them. Was there something that we were missing?
Good question.
whether we miss it or not, will this, results of this be made part of today's minutes?
Yes,
It will.
yes.
Should be. Yeah. Absolutely.
It's being recorded right now and it's shared right now, so
That'll have to be addressed.
it's recorded.
Yeah, so are we missing anything? Was there something that we should have had here that we didn't have here? Because this is just us going through the discussions.
Yeah,
Well, not to touch the third rail again, but, and it's implicit in this, is the school's use of parts of this building and how much they may need versus what they're using. That remains a question in my mind.
If at all.
Okay.
yeah, and also not mentioned.
This might be a question for Joe. You're in charge of every building in the city,
Not schools, thank goodness.
not the schools.
Thank goodness. Those are stations to themselves, yeah.
But you're in charge of this one, right?
Yeah, correct.
I'm curious at the high school if there's a wing that's not occupied.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that.
You mean to
Yourself,
move people
what?
temporarily, Peter?
Huh?
Move people temporarily there?
In my opinion, the high school number of students is now below 1,000. It had 2,000 at one point. If there's a wing that's not being used, the school department administration certainly could go into that wing at the high school and vacate spaces being used here that could be used by city functions, police functions, reestablishing things. But we haven't asked them yet if they'd be willing to move.
Well, we've
So-
had this discussion, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I just have to play my wet blanket role and say, this is really not the purview of the committee. This is clearly in the purview of the city manager, and she is the one that will make these decisions at the end.
In this
I
discussion.
think the input is great, I mean, I think we will take that, but ultimately, the city manager will make the decisions what she deems is the best interest of the city. So,
Something
Peter, I
that,
have to strongly disagree with part of what you said.
okay,
The ultimate, what you said, it's ultimately the city manager's decision, of course.
Yeah.
But as I said at the last meeting, and I don't think you were here, we can't implement anything, this committee can't implement a thing, that's the manager's job. But we are charged with making a recommendation.
oh, I agree with
If
that,
that
To the city
recommendation,
council.
sure.
that
I agree with
recommendation may be to see if the
Inclusive
city,
of.
if the school department can move all or some of its functions that are in this building to a different location.
I understand
That's the level of thing I'm talking about in terms of a third rail.
that, sure.
We can't direct the city manager to do anything, wouldn't even think of anything that crazy. But
I'm not hearing that, I'm just playing the role of,
I understand,
the-
but that's why I called it a third rail, because
staff that's, that works for the city manager, and I'm just making sure it's clear what her purview is.
And by the way, this is not the city manager's committee. This is the mayor and council's committee.
And I'm not implying it is. What I'm
Okay.
implying is that there's certain roles that are delegated to the city manager, and that those roles fall into that. And I'm not saying you do not have any recommendation, and I'm not saying this is her committee. I'm just being clear, because it needs to be stated.
If any of us were the city manager, we would want people with these kind of backgrounds, your backgrounds, to think the problem through and give a recommendation. And that's why the mayor set us up.
yeah, I think that's all we've been asked to do. And whether it's implemented or not is not our decision. But to make the recommendation, that is our charge.
And I agree, I think one of the things that we do need to think through is that anything we do has a price tag associated with it. And we have, at least at this point in time, a limited budget. So we just need to think about if we make a recommendation and it's implemented, that takes away from the money that's available to do other functions that are sitting up there on the things we thought about, so.
one thing that might be helpful, and maybe ask you to go back and ask the city manager is to know where we do have empty space within the city, including
Yes,
the high
good
school.
idea.
Because we're gonna need to know that just around swing space recommendations for construction if we get to that stage. So it would be helpful to know how much we have, because it impacts our recommendation, really. You know, because we have to think about cost as far as how many people can we move at a time, how much construction can you do at a time?
Right,
Yeah.
and we could, well, one of the things Rick asked, you asked, what didn't we put down? One thing we didn't put down is, and it's been discussed, is punching out the back with some kind of wing.
Yeah.
You know, we could get to a point where it's a choice between adding a wing or moving the school department.
Well, I think it may not have been asked directly, but of the items we had, the one that got the least number of points is maintaining everything in the space we have. So I think intuitively it says that the idea of construction, whatever size it is certainly something that is consistent with the rankings we have there.
Yeah, this is
If the ranking to do everything, the last thing says, you know, do everything in the same amount of space, if that was rated high, that would change things around altogether. But I think the idea is that, yeah, you know, in order to do what we'd like to do, there is construction involved, whether it be within the confines of the building or some sort of an addition.
One thing, just a point of clarification, we weren't charged with a budget. We were charged with making a recommendation. And, you know, the budgetary issues become, these guys rule with the consultants. If, and whatever, of course, the council has to authorize it, but that's a negotiation yet to happen based on things we don't even know what they're gonna be. So we have to be cognizant, I mean, we're all taxpayers, of course, but that's why staying within $42 million, that's abstract, we don't know. That's an impossible question to answer.
right.
The one thing that I would say that the committee should think about, though, is that you want something that's realistic and could realistically be implemented. You don't want to make a recommendation that the city council says, well, we can't ever do that.
Well, I mean, I think, yes, that's part of, I mean, there is some need to think about it, but like how much we're working with, right? I mean, if we're working with a very small sum, it's like, it might not, our recommendation might be something, it's gonna be vastly different than if you say we have $60 million to work with or $80 million. I mean, what that number is relevant to how we can make a recommendation. And I'm not saying.
We don't have the data to know if we make a recommendation, there is nobody at this table except possibly those two who could even give an estimate, whether we're talking about a $35 million, a $45 million, or a $65 million idea. You know, all we can do is rank things in terms of possibilities.
Yeah, getting the job done. Yeah.
It's almost obvious from the fact that the council has set up this committee that they weren't ready, willing, and able to vote $42 million for a new police station.
Peter, I'm gonna challenge that.
I don't think that's true.
Yeah, I think
Well, then,
we had the working group had come up with a plan to put a wing on. That wing had been diminished for aesthetics. But it was, I think the reason we formed a committee was this council knew that we were focused on this building. We'd exhausted the options outside of it. And the big wing obstructing view was not gonna fly. It became a more complicated problem that needed some brains put to it, and that's why we're here.
And
Now, you know, I know that you feel that there weren't the votes. We don't know. We don't know, because we never, you know, the existing plan for the diminished wing was 42 million.
I think, though, it's also important to note that it is such a high price tag, no matter what the number is, that there is a strong desire on the council that if we're moving forward, we're gonna get it right. And I think that that's the critical element, and they didn't think we were there. So that's why it went to this committee level, because they just didn't think we were there yet.
I have 2 questions. Do you know the price tag of the Dover Police Department? What that was?
Yes.
Oh boy, I just looked at your face, I don't need to know.
No, it was really low, but the problem is it's impossible to determine because it's commingled with a parking garage. And so some of
Yes,
the
it
funding
is.
is commingled with the parking garage. But that total price tag was at 25 million, is that right? But that was at a time when construction, that was pre-COVID construction.
Okay.
So
And when you were talking about the wing, that was $42 million? Is that what the number was to put on?
We had gotten it down to 42, hadn't we?
And when was that?
6 months ago?
Oh,
Right.
So it's
okay.
important to know there are 3 police stations within, I'd say, a 60-mile radius of us right now. They're under construction. The cost per square foot is consistent with all of them. They're all north of $1,000 a square foot. One of them is $1,500 a square foot right now. It's the one that is just under construction now, maybe 40 miles down the road. But there's no mystery. This idea that we're gonna find a super discounted, it's counterfeit. We will not do that. We're going to pay for the cost of construction at the time. Whether we, so when we understand a square footage of our needs of square footage, a very simple exercise is to simply apply the $1,000 to $1,200 a square foot to that. We were at 900 last year. Every 6 months we wait, I guarantee you, it's just going up, up, up.
Those all new construction?
Yes, all new
Yeah,
construction.
and let me just pick up on that if I can, and the fact is that that's one of the reasons the working group was looking to do as much as they could in the existing building, because new construction, as Joe's indicating, was approaching and going over 1,000, that renovation was 5, 6
Yeah, the trick was renovation to a certain percentage, because
percentage.
if we start to have to move people out of here and store things and people temporarily, that's
So
what's stranded
again,
cost.
that's one of the reasons that, we ended up trying to do as much as we could in the existing space, was frankly to bring the cost down.
And just as a frame of reference to your point, Joe, Salem, New Hampshire Police Department is undergoing a new building right now. They just started. They've started construction. It's a nice analogy because the police force is actually, Portsmouth's a little bigger in front force size, but their project is, and I have it pulled up, they're doing a total of 40,000 square foot building. Their construction costs are, the project costs are just north of 39 million, and the cost per square foot is just under 1,000, though they embarked on this about a year ago, so they're, they got the benefits of some of the, like, every, to your every 6 month point.
Yeah.
But it's a good,
It's a good comparison.
it's a really good comparison, I think.
Yeah, and we had, I had a construction person in town call me and say, John, they can't cost that much. He then looked at comparables and said, yeah, it's pretty hard to argue with this. We added a member to the working group with a engineering background who had the same thoughts. And he ended up concluding that, he came in saying, it can't be this high.
And then he checked with his colleagues and found out, yeah.
So, we've taken several runs at that.
Just to Councilor Cook's point is, I strongly feel that we gotta get it right. Like, we got one bite at this apple, so to me, 25 million is a waste of my tax dollars, because I'm a taxpayer as well. So if we're gonna do it, we need to do it right, and we gotta get it right the first time, because anything else is just gonna be a Band-Aid that's gonna continue on.
We'll be back here, the next working group will be back dealing with
I
this.
I probably won't be, but.
Right. Well, the beauty
The
of
next,
if you went off-site was you could have just a police facility and just a budget for a police facility. Now, as we're looking at renovating this whole building and all the issues we've talked about, this will be a long phased project, right? 6-7 years, something like that, touching.
Yeah, the challenge though is that if you go offsite, you just build a police facility, you move the police, you're not dealing with the challenges in this building. And so you have that additional capital expense that we haven't even considered. So you still haven't fixed the HVAC, you still haven't fixed, and you still own this building. So it's still our building. So
And it's still
That's
Joe's
the
problem to
balance.
maintain it.
exactly.
So it is one bite of
Pipes,
the apple
electrical and all.
this has to be a big apple.
You're gonna have Peter Rice every year coming in on the capital improvement plan for $1.5 million, $2 million to take care of deficiencies.
Right.
Let's get it all done at once.
So I have another question for the committee, and I think that this would be a helpful way to think about this before we bring on an architectural firm, is what kind of recommendation do you want to make back to the council? Do you want to make kind of a few different recommendations? If we can do X, Y, or Z, if we have this kind of funding, let's do this. If we have additional funding, this is an additional priority. Kind of that, and let then the council say, so essentially it's kind of ranking what our priorities are, so that when the council does determine what the budget is, then it's much easier to determine what the priorities
Councilor
would
Cook,
be.
I think that's a good idea, but we need to meet with the architectural firm to give them ideas that we've thought of for them to come up with, yes, you can do it, or no, you can't.
I agree, Peter. So you have to do first. We have nothing. We have nothing. We have a blank canvas.
I think the intersection of that and the final staffing report that says what the needs are today and 10 years from today and 20 years from today and so on is the foundation. And I know I've said that I don't know how many times, but I think that superset of information informs the dialogue around, okay, what are the priorities and how much space does Department A through Z require in this building? And then what does that mean in terms of the space we have? And then what is the cost to renovate space that needs to be fit for police use versus general municipal use? Because there's gonna be a delta there. You guys need very different space than Peter might in terms of security and the other measures that are relevant for you all. And so understanding those unit economics are gonna inform all the decisions we have to make in terms of finalizing a recommendation that's substantive, minimally substantive.
I just want to throw this in. Remember that ChatGPT and AI is coming into our workforce. And so when you talk to people in business, engineers, there's a certain whole group, they're thinking now the average work week is going to be 15 to 20 hours, that these AI chat, the computers were going to be taking over where there were people. So I can see the workforce, unless
Certainly
it's the trades are going to go up. But just because I had a long conversation with a couple of people last week about this very thing, talking about space and what is going on, we've got to, it might not never change, or it might go down, the need.
You're right on.
Let me just, if you don't mind, when we built the library, we heard the same discussion. People aren't reading books, everything's online, we don't need a library. Everybody's gonna be accessing it through their iPads, etc. So why are we building a library? Well, the librarians told us, we're adjusting to what's happening, and we still need a building. So, with all due respect, I heard from experts that told me that in 10 years, the library would be empty because nobody's going in there. That ain't the case.
And I would not be one of those people.
Right.
I told you not
But
to, I told you to build a library.
But that was the argument
Yeah.
against building a library.
Believe me, I don't want to listen to him, John.
Yeah, no, I understand.
Don't want to listen to them.
And you can't call 911 and get a bot.
Yeah.
So,
Right,
like, there was
right.
like this.
Right. So on the policing side, you can see how that space need is not going to change in the same way that on the municipal side, I've asked this question of the city manager, how many people can work from home?
Yeah, oh yeah.
You know, we do have people that have to be here because they're in meetings, you know. Peter and Joe are great examples of this, but not all of the staff is in meetings that they have to attend in person. They can sometimes attend those online. So, you know, how are we shifting there as well?
And I think that solves some workforce and quality of life problems too.
Sure it is.
How do you address, you know, cost of living where folks want to have dual income households and the mother's going to work full time and try to still care for children to some extent.
Sure.
Well, hybrid work supports that. And how do we keep, because we do have great staff, how do we retain that staff and then how do we grow it and fill vacancies as they emerge? Well, we need to be a competitive employer, and I don't think the government's there yet, but if we want to be forward-looking and anticipate what people are going to expect from their employers 5 and 10 and 20 years from now, because that's the work we're doing. This work is not for a 5-year time horizon. This work is for a 50-year time horizon. What is the workforce going to look like 50 years from now? We're not going to be right, but we should try to get close and anticipate what people might expect.
On the police side, it's not gonna change.
I understand that.
Not so much.
But it goes to what space in this complex is required when and how much and for whom.
And what percentage of our budget we wanted to, well, we need to talk about the budget, how much is going to police versus how much is going to go to other parts of, you know, other parts of the complex, right? I think we need to know those breakdowns.
Yeah, and the last time that total solution was looked at was 2017, and it was envisioned as a capital spending over 7 years. It's not one big lunk of 42 million to go in, right? I think, Peter, you can answer this question. I don't think there's any other way than that we would do it, right?
There's gonna be a phasing no matter what. It comes down to, you know, trying not to do steps that preclude better steps as we're building it out. You know, obviously the police, based on ranking, but you know, in my opinion, you know, is the driver behind this. So it falls into that top category of, you know, the first phases need to improve, you know, their spaces. And obviously we try to improve the overall function at the same time or shortly after.
Right. And that's why, on to Kate's point too, that's why I asked that question about should we have a varied recommendation? Like, this is your priority, let's address this, and then if we can address this next thing, and then if we can address this. So you know, if we've identified the police as the priority, then that should be the first thing that we ask to fund. So that's kind of what I'm asking is.
So if I may, one of the things we heard from the architects that we interviewed was that the previous scope of work focused on a specific area and was very restricted in terms of being able to break out into other spaces of the city hall. What they said was that now that restriction is off, it gives them the creative opportunity to look at, you know, more creative solutions.
You said the previous, you were talking about our working group?
The previous designs and the previous
design
teams, yeah.
Yeah, right.
effort.
Yes.
Yeah, they were limited.
They were
Oh, yeah,
limited.
very much so,
Yeah.
very much so.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, so.
So, you know, we're hopefully gonna be able to get a firm on board in the near future. And, you know, and then set up a meeting with you all so that you can impart all these, you know, what you're thinking, and they can take it in. And, you know, I think we're gonna be well served, so it's an opportunity, you know, this is not gonna be done in a vacuum. This is gonna be done with everybody's input, so.
I hope you're doing New Hampshire people.
Well, I think it's important, to say, we interviewed several firms, they responded to the proposal.
5 firms.
5 firms, well, I think, 7 responded, we interviewed 5. And they were, for the most part, they were all outstanding, they really were
And
outstanding. It was-
everybody except for one, I think, was a New Hampshire based.
Yeah, very much so.
So we'll meet again next Wednesday, then we won't meet again until July 2nd. I think that's it.
You left it at the last meeting? I was in the doctor's office for that.
Yes, we're scheduled to meet next week.
Yeah,
We're scheduled to meet next week,
Is that the 18th?
the 18th, and then the next meeting I have is the 9th.
9th of July, yeah.
9th of July, And then after that, the 9th and the 23rd of July.
So do we wanna go to the 90-minute cadence starting next week with the anticipation that the report is gonna be ready?
That's the hope. So if the report is ready, yes.
We'll start 90-minute cadence on the, whatever that is, 18th.
As needed.
Yeah.
I mean, you may have a week like this where we're not reading a 60-page report.
No, I understand, I just, for the purposes of trying to understand what we're allocating
Yes,
would
for-
be, so the assumption is that it's 90 minutes starting next week.
And next week, we were gonna try to move that meeting to 4 o'clock to better accommodate work schedules.
That would be lovely.
Yes.
With the meeting on the 18th, is it 4?
It's 4 o'clock is what I have. I think the city manager was gonna try to move it to 4 o'clock. That was my understanding for next week, yeah. So,
I don't think I don't think
I don't have an
Joanna
updated
sent
calendar.
anything
invite.
out on it.
okay. All right.
Still scheduled for 3
Send
o'clock.
it.
Yeah.
It's still scheduled for 3.
I
I'm
have
It's still
scheduled.
scheduled
Okay.
for an hour, that's why I asked the question about that.
Yeah.
I have it on 3.
So we're gonna try for 4 to 5:30 or?
We're gonna try for 4 to 5:30. If for some reason that doesn't work because there's somebody else in this room, then we will,
Do 3 to 4.
Can we get that
3 to 4:30.
clarified by tomorrow?
Yeah, that would be helpful.
Yeah, we can.
I'm leaving town that day.
Yeah, because I already put it on my schedule for 4 because of our discussion at the
Yeah, I
last
had it
meeting,
for-
but
I had it for 3 and I was leaving town at 5, so.
we don't want you to miss it, so.
I will not be here. The county's full delegation meeting on the budget, hearing on the. That time. No, it's fine.
Keep us in mind, man.
You got it?
Yes, motion to
Thank you
adjourn,
all.
we're good?
Motion to adjourn.
See you, Renee.
Right.